Hello, I'm Natalie Mears. I'm a senior lecturer in early modern British history here at the University of Durham, and I work particularly on Elizabethan politics and religion. And I'm going to talk today about the 1590s. First of all, I guess we should think about why focus on the 1590s. What's special about this period? Well, traditionally it's actually been a period which has had the least amount of attention. My supervisor, the person who taught me, John Guy, memorably said once that the problem was that Elizabeth's reign was so long that we all managed to just get to the Armada and then we'd collapse in a heap of exhaustion and no one had any energy left to look at the 1590s. And one of the things that he did a few years ago when he was teaching me was actually to try and right that wrong and really put attention on the 1590s. And in fact, he was so successful that I feel at the moment that I'm the only Elizabethan historian who is not currently working on the 1590s. So how did John get everybody working on this period, and what's special about it? Well, the argument he made was that Elizabeth's reign can be divided into two periods, and the break comes around 1585 to 1587. When England intervenes in the Netherlands, then as a result is at war with Spain, and also when Mary Queen of Scots is executed. And he argued this was a big turning point because on either side of this period you had a very kind of coherent set of political issues, a set kind of political agenda, and also the ideas that influenced the way that people thought and the way people acted were very coherent. So, what were these two periods like? The first period, so up to 1585-87, was dominated by a number of issues on the political agenda. They were Elizabeth's marriage, the succession until she got married, the threat posed by Mary Queen of Scots, the threat posed by Catholic conspiracy, and to a much lesser extent, the nature of the Elizabethan Church and the Puritans' campaign for reform. Now, I've talked about all of these in other podcasts, so I'm going to leave discussing those in greater depth for now. The other aspect of this first period of Elizabeth's reign were the ideas that underpinned the way people acted and the things that they believed. And what Guy argues is that during the first 30 years of the reign, the idea of what we call the mixed polity was dominant. Now, I've talked about the mixed polity when I talked about Elizabeth's gender, but I will just go over it again. A mixed polity is a country that is ruled in combination by a monarch, an aristocracy, and a democracy. And in 16th century terms, and in 16th century English terms, that means Elizabeth, her Privy Council, and Parliament. And it was argued that these three groups governed England, that Elizabeth couldn't do anything she liked because she was limited by the advice of her Privy Council, and any major changes, notably to the succession and to religion, had to go through Parliament and obtain parliamentary consent. So it's a kind of system of checks and balances. So that's the first period of Elizabeth's reign. It has very definite political issues and it has a very definite political culture, set of ideas that shapes the way people see politics and the way they react. The 1590s, the period from 1587 strictly, Guy argues was very different. The big change was the outbreak of war with Spain and the execution of Mary Queen of Scots. This meant that the political agenda changed. No longer were marriage and succession, and indeed Catholic conspiracy, of major concern. Elizabeth's main rival for the throne and her heir, Mary Queen of Scots, was now dead. It was most likely, though not certain, that Elizabeth would be succeeded by James VI, who was Mary Queen of Scots' son. He had certain advantages. He was male and he was Protestant. Okay, he was Scottish, but you can't have everything. We were at war. That was the kind of biggest thing dominating the agenda. With it brings problems about taxation, about how you're going to fund the war. Economically, the 1590s was also a very difficult time. There's growing famine, outbreaks of plague, so people are poorer. There's more vagrancy, there's more crime. And those are things which you do not want when you're at war. You want your population to be orderly, you want them to do what you want, and you want them to provide you with enough taxation to fight probably the biggest power in the whole of Europe. So, war, crime, vagrancy, taxation, famine, plague, they're all the big issues in the 1590s. What about political ideas? Well, the mixed polity is seriously out of fashion in the 1590s. You do not want ideas that councillors and parliament can contribute to the way that the monarch rules the country when you're at war. You need everybody to toe the line. And so the ideas of the mixed polity go out of fashion, and instead we have something known as imperial monarchy. Now, this was an idea which had come to particular fruition actually in the 1530s with Henry VIII, and as a result of the break with Rome. What an imperial monarch was somebody who had no rival jurisdictions either within their country or outside. They were the supreme and only power for their people. And they also had authority over both the state and also the church. So this was a very kind of authoritarian style of monarchy, one where the monarch is in charge and everyone toes the line. And that's the dominant idea in the 1590s. It's rather strange that it's the dominant idea, to be honest, though, because as John Guy points out, the 1590s also appears to be the period where Elizabeth is actually less in charge than she had been before, and she's actually more willing, or she puts up with her councillors actually doing things without her knowledge than she'd ever done before. So imperial monarchy is certainly the theory, it's how things should have been happening, but it might not have actually happened like that in reality. So that's why we might want to think about the 1590s separately from the rest of the reign as a period that was very different in terms of issues and the ideas that underpinned the way that politics worked. But that's not the whole story. We need to think about what the 1590s really was like.